Tonight, the government details how its changes to the Stage 3 tax cuts will affect Australians. Also tonight, tropical cyclone Kirrily intensifies into a Category 3 storm as it bears down on Queensland. Tasmanian Supreme Court Judge Gregory Geeson facing charges in New South Wales and calls to protect the giants of Tasmania's forests before they're gone forever. Good evening, Guy Stayner with ABC News. Anthony Albanese has abandoned key elements of massive tax cuts his government has repeatedly supported since it came to power, instead redirecting them towards millions of workers on low and middle incomes. The Prime Minister's acknowledged the backflip will be controversial, but insists Australians need financial relief and that he has the ticker to do what's right. It's already triggered a furious backlash from the opposition leader, who's accused Mr Albanese of inflicting an unforgivable lie on voters. Here's political reporter Matthew Doran.
In a hurry to begin the public sales pitch,
You guys get out of the way,
after upending a 5-year-old tax plan he'd inherited and had committed to keeping, just 5 months before it was due to come into force.
When economic circumstances change, the right thing to do is to change economic policy.
We're seeing a political charlatan who's prepared to do or say anything.
The original cuts passed back in 2019 would have left the tax system looking like this from the 1st of July this year. The main change was the removal of an entire tax bracket, meaning everyone earning between $45,000 and $200,000 a year would pay the same rate of tax. Labor's proposal shoves that extra tax bracket back in and it tinkers with the rates and thresholds around it. The lowest rate of tax is cut from 19% to 16%. The second tax rate sits at 30%. The 37% tax rate is the one that's reappeared, but it kicks in at a higher income level than before, of $135,000 a year, and the top tax rate from $190,000 a year. But how that translates to your bank account is the key here. Before, low-income earners weren't going to see anything from the Coalition's Stage 3 tax cuts. Under Labor's proposal, they'll get an extra $800. More cash will continue through those middle-income ranges up until $150,000 a year when the tide turns. The tax cuts are still there, they're just not as large for higher income earners as they otherwise would have been.
It's great for the lower income people because obviously you get more back, but at the same time, the higher income, I mean, they worked for their money, so why should they be penalised?
To use arguments like, oh, things have changed, is spurious.
Peter Dutton not commenting today on whether he'd repeal the plan if he became Prime Minister, rather wanting to focus on matters of character and credibility for the current PM.
Look at what he says and contrast that with what he actually does, because he's not a truthful person.
I'll tell you what my integrity is. Not looking at low and middle income earners and saying, sorry, I'm just the Prime Minister, I'm not in a position to help you.
The policy pivot will be put to its first electoral test in just over a month, when voters in the outer Melbourne seat of Dunkley go to the polls in a by-election.
I think it's good as long as inflation doesn't go up.
That's great for me and for my family.
But on whether it's a broken promise.
More like a reality check.
The government always changes their mind all the time. I don't really trust what they say regardless, sorry.
The Prime Minister citing Treasury analysis to insist that giving more people more money won't drive inflation even higher.
See you later.
And he's not done yet, promising more cost of living relief in the May budget, while setting the consumer watchdog on the nation's supermarkets to investigate whether customers are being gouged at the checkout. Matthew Doran, ABC News, Canberra.
North Queenslanders are taking shelter tonight as they brace for the full impact of tropical cyclone Kirrily. The latest forecast has the Category 3 system to make landfall just north of Townsville around 10 p.m. But the damage is expected to be widespread as gale force winds batter coastal communities.
A raging sea off the North Queensland coast. It's a treacherous playground for adventure seekers, the early symptoms of a looming cyclone.
We can come out about 7:30 this morning for a quick kite, get in well before it gets too windy.
Kirralee is on a rampage. At her core, 165 km/h gusts. Hamilton Islands copped 115 an hour winds, and heavy rain brought early flooding in downtown Bowen.
We could see isolated totals of up to 300 millimetres in a 24-hour period as this system crosses the coast.
Elders have been flown off Palm Island, which doesn't have an evacuation centre.
We're the largest discrete indigenous community with a large population, and we do need one.
The system is due to hit Townsville and surrounds late tonight.
We've distributed more than 20,000 sandbags at the moment.
This afternoon, residents were ordered to seek shelter and lock down.
We're prepared and ready for the worst. Now we wait and hope for the best.
Along the coast, communities spent the day counting down and getting ready. Townsville's most vulnerable have also taken shelter in evacuation centres. It's the barest of basics. Residents and visitors on Magnetic Island, just off the coast of Townsville, have been cut off from the mainland. They've been urged to have enough boiled drinking water to last them 3 days in case of power failures. Across the region, more than 100 schools are closed. In Ayr, locals spent the day preparing, and teams of volunteers have been busy filling sandbags.
It's been outstanding actually for the last 4 or 5 days. You can see by the people here, this has just been non-stop for that whole time.
Some residents have boarded up their homes, just like they've done in previous cyclones.
Oh, I've been set up from the last few, and all we do is put the timber back over windows so we don't break the windows.
Extra police and emergency crews have been deployed. Interstate help is also on its way. A sleepless night ahead. Lily Nothling, ABC News, Townsville.
Tasmanian Supreme Court Judge Gregory Geeson is facing criminal charges in New South Wales. Justice Geeson faced the Hobart Magistrates Court in December on charges of emotional abuse or intimidation and common assault. He pleaded not guilty to both. The 62-year-old has also been charged with breaching an apprehended domestic violence order 3 times while in New South Wales last November. He'll face a Sydney court on the 22nd of February. Tasmania's Attorney-General told reporters he wasn't aware of the charges before reading about them in the media.
My department secretary has confirmed the charges and that advice has been provided to me early this morning.
Tasmania's Port Authority says huge volumes of freight and thousands of cruise passengers will be affected if marine pilots go on strike this weekend. The union representing TasPort's pilots is threatening to indefinitely stop weekend work from midday on Sunday if its demands over pay and conditions aren't met. Pilots ensure the safe passage of ships in and out of port and are compulsory for most vessels over 35 metres. TasPort says 15 ships with tens of thousands of tonnes of freight will be affected on Sunday, as well as 5,000 cruise passengers. The state government has urged both parties to come to the table.
Disruption equals cost, and we're already under enough pressure as a country, and let's encourage those parties to sit down and work it out without unnecessary industrial disruptive action.
Over the past 2 years, floods have ravaged low-lying areas of Australia, breaking riverbanks and inundating homes. New figures show more than 6,000 Australians are still waiting for their insurers to pay out as the industry grapples with one disaster after another. It's left many living in precarious accommodation until their claims are resolved.
Shelley Sybaris is living in a caravan after her home was destroyed by floods in 2022.
I came home and, yeah, devastating. Just absolutely devastating. That was the initial
quote.
Adding to her trauma, dealing with her insurer, who claimed some damage was pre-existing, it offered her less than half her insured amount.
I've dealt with RACV for 30 years, never had a problem. I don't know why they're doing this to us.
New figures show 6,500 out of 160,000 house insurance claims from the major fall floods of the past 2 years are still outstanding. A federal parliamentary inquiry is looking at insurers' response to recent floods.
The insurance system is broken and it needs urgent reform.
Financial counsellors say they're hearing from new clients daily who need insurance help.
They are coming in with issues like delays, claim denials, problems with strip outs of their properties, problems with accessing trades and supply of goods, and also issues with temporary accommodation.
Insurers say they're dealing with a perfect storm of events as natural disasters become more intense.
We're seeing a challenge in getting builders, finding temporary accommodation for people who can't live in their homes is also a challenge. It was inevitable that we would have some claims that didn't work perfectly.
Following the ABC's inquiries, RACV settled with Shelley. People are urged to raise complaints with their insurer and the regulator. Alison Brownlee, ABC News.
Eyes are on Canberra this evening for the presentation of the Australian of the Year Awards. Reporter Evelyn Manfield joins us from outside the event. Evelyn, tell us about the Australians being honoured tonight.
Hi Guy, well they've just all walked the red carpet here in Canberra and really the excitement was palpable. We've got 4 categories. We've got Local Hero, we've got Young and Senior Australians of the Year, and then the big award, the Australian of the Year. And so the finalist from Tasmania tonight is Stephanie Trethewey. Now she is the founder of national charity Motherland, which helps support rural women after she experienced isolation herself. Now she has been criticised by animal welfare activists after hidden camera footage was taken in an abattoir she owned with her husband Sam until late last year. So Stephanie there among 8 finalists for the Australian of the Year. Now it all kicks off at 7:30 and we'll progressively begin to find out the winners of each of those categories. Since then, and certainly they'll be in excellent company. I mean, past winners of the Australian of the Year award include people like Grace Tame, Dylan Alcott and last year's Taran Brumfitt.
Evelyn Manfield, thank you, and even the Flyers get an invite. Tasmania is home to the tallest flowering trees in the world, but more frequent and severe bushfires could threaten their existence. Scientists want more done to protect these trees, which take around 500 years to become fully grown.
The world's tallest flowering trees, the mountain ash, have drawn Brett Mifsud to Tasmania's southwest for 30 years so he can find and measure them.
So here we are at the top of an old growth Eucalyptus regnans tree. This tree's about 500 years old. I'm at around 55, 60 metres up. Let's have a look at a few of the features.
He fears this could be the last generation of giants.
Now that these trees are protected in reserves, the biggest threat to them is fire.
Intense fire is rare in these wet forests, but in 2019, dry conditions led to catastrophic bushfires in Tasmania's southwest. Mr Mifsud estimates 17 of the largest trees in Australia, all found in Tasmania, have been destroyed in bushfires since 2003.
If there's a fire every 10 years and the new crop can't get to maturity, this species can actually disappear from that particular landscape.
It isn't just giant mountain ash that's at risk. Stringy bark and blue gum also bear the immense weight of climate threats. While Tasmania's Parks and Wildlife Service says it prioritises protecting giant trees during fires, University of Tasmania Professor David Bowman wants a management plan to be developed similar to plans made for another giant tree, the North American sequoia.
They are having crews to remove fuel, wrap trees in foil, irrigate if necessary, because they are absolutely of huge value. And there are some practical measures we can take to save these things, and if we don't take them, they are going to die.
The future of Tasmania's last giants resting on decisions made today. Clancy Barlin, ABC News.
Russia has accused Ukraine of killing 65 of its own prisoners of war by deliberately shooting down a Russian military plane. Moscow says the captured soldiers were being flown to an exchange when the plane crashed in the southern Belgorod region near Ukraine. Kyiv says, unlike previous swaps, it wasn't told to secure safe airspace.
A giant fireball near the Russian city of Belgorod.
Good God, this woman says. Footage posted on social media showed a plane falling from the sky.
We saw a red fiery object, then we heard an explosion and saw a red flash, and that was it.
We all ran outside in case there was any help needed. It crashed far away, but it was still loud and scary.
The remnants of a Russian military transport plane could be seen scattered across fields near the Ukrainian border. Moscow immediately accused Ukraine of shooting it down with missiles in a terrorist act and said it had been carrying 65 Ukrainian prisoners of war on their way to an exchange.
Instead of this exchange taking place, the Ukrainian side launched an anti-aircraft missile attack on this plane, which became fatal.
3 Russian officers and 6 crew members were also said to be on board. Ukraine did not confirm or deny involvement. Military intelligence said a swap had been due to take place, but that Kyiv was not told to secure its airspace for the transfer.
It's evident the Russians are playing with the lives of Ukrainian prisoners, with the feelings of their families. It's necessary to establish all clear facts, considering the plane crashed on Russian territory.
The Ukrainians are claiming one thing, the Russians are claiming another, and we just don't know enough to comment on it.
In a church near the crash site, a vigil for the Russian servicemen on board. It's unlikely Russia will allow an independent investigation, so the true circumstances of the incident may never be known. Elias Kluwer, ABC News.
4 people have now died in Victoria's worst drowning event for nearly 20 years. An enormous rescue effort couldn't save the extended family group, which got caught in a suspected rip at an unpatrolled beach on Phillip Island.
It's a picturesque stretch of coastline, now the scene of a horrible tragedy that's claimed 4 lives and shocked the local community.
It's very sad, and unfortunately it just does happen. These beautiful beaches, people just don't know the power of the ocean.
It's been almost 20 years since we've seen a single event that's resulted in such a high number of loss of life in Victorian waters.
The group, an extended family from Melbourne's southeast, were visiting Phillip Island yesterday. 4 people waded into the water at Forest Caves Beach before getting swept into a rip. The alarm was raised and a flurry of emergency service vehicles joined off-duty lifeguards surfing nearby in the desperate attempt to save them.
Our crews worked amazingly hard to provide every opportunity to those 4 people.
A 23-year-old man, a 20-year-old woman and a 43-year-old woman visiting from overseas all died at the scene. A second 20-year-old woman was flown to hospital where she later died.
This tragedy has taken the lives of 4 people, and it's fair to say that the impact will be profound on those families.
Police spent the day formally identifying the victims, which are believed to be part of the Indian community. The Indian High Commission has labelled it a heartbreaking tragedy and expressed its deepest condolences to the victims' families. The unpatrolled beach on Phillip Island's south coast is popular with surfers, but that attraction also makes it dangerous.
Tragically, as we found out yesterday and all too often, it is full of rips and hidden dangers.
Only a very, very experienced swimmer should be entering the water to swim in those areas.
Authorities will look at whether there are sufficient warnings in place.
In terms of what further actions need to be taken at that location, I really should wait for that investigation to be concluded.
Lifesaving Victoria is urging people to stick to patrolled beaches and swim between the flags.
As we approach this long weekend, everyone needs to work together to make sure that everyone comes home from the beach at the end of the day.
Police will prepare a report for the coroner. Jessie Thompson, ABC News.
2 Melbourne statues have been vandalised on the eve of Australia Day. In St Kilda, a statue of Captain Cook has been sawn off at the ankles. Police say the vandalism was reported by members of the public in the early hours of this morning. Closer to the CBD, a monument in Queen Victoria Gardens was splashed with red paint. Workers were on site today cleaning it off. Police say both acts of vandalism are being investigated. An investigation is underway into how a live red imported fire ant was found in an Australia Post parcel in Tasmania South. Biosecurity Tasmania says the non-reproductive female ant was found in a package from Queensland containing plant material. It says it's traced the package and put extra surveillance and trapping operations in place. Red fire ants have been eradicated from most parts of Australia, but there are still clusters of them in southeast Queensland. The ants have a painful bite and are an environmental pest known to kill local plants and wildlife. The fire ant has been destroyed. To finance now, and the local share market produced its 5th consecutive rise today. Here's Alan Kohler.
The reason the share market went up again today was that the People's Bank of China cut interest rates, which boosted the iron ore price, and that led to solid gains in the share prices of Australia's listed iron ore miners, BHP, Rio Tinto and Fortescue. But there was one nasty prang. Domino's Pizza was sliced 30% after a trading update that said December half earnings would be less than last year because of falling sales in parts of Asia and Europe, especially Japan. Now, the strength of the iron ore price after that Chinese rate cut is in the context of rising commodity prices generally, caused by attacks on the shipping in the Red Sea. Iron ore is actually the commodity least affected by this, although more than 10% of the steel trade is being disrupted. But the biggest impact is on fertiliser. The US market also had its 5th rise in a row last night, and share prices in Shanghai and Hong Kong responded to the rate cut with solid gains, and the Aussie dollar was steady against all major currencies. Finally, here's a chart that explains the change to the Stage 3 tax cuts. Now, the vertical axis is percentage of income. Horizontal axis is salary, ranging up to $200,000. Now, the blue line shows how the tax cuts were going to be distributed before today's changes. The more you earned, the more you got. The orange line shows the new distribution. Now, for those on salaries above $60,000 a year, it's basically the same for all. And those earning less than $45,000 now get a tax cut where they wouldn't have before. And that's finance.
Alexander Zverev has expressed his joy at playing his best tennis since recovering from injury after upsetting Carlos Alcaraz at the Australian Open. Last night, the German 6th seed split the men's draw open when he stunned the Spaniard in 4 sets. His win sets up a semi-final clash with Daniil Medvedev.
Alexander Zverev had never beaten a top 5 player at a Grand Slam.
Oh, he's done it.
But his victory over world number 2 Carlos Alcaraz is one of his finest performances and comes 18 months after a painful ankle injury.
I was kind of on top of my game before the injury happened. You know, I'm obviously extremely happy to be back where I am and winning these kind of matches.
Zverev was aggressive from the outset.
And he needs one wonderful display from the German.
He bludgeoned his way through the first 2 sets and was a break-up in the third before the Spaniard roared back.
You just never know.
And despite some bandaged toes, the German recovered to put the Spanish star away in 4 sets.
I'm sad with my level today because I've been playing good tennis, you know, the round before, this one with a lot of confidence.
Zverev's tournament has been overshadowed by allegations of domestic violence against a former girlfriend, claims he denies. The case is set for trial in Germany this year. Scrutiny will only grow if Zverev reaches the final. His next opponent is Daniil Medvedev.
He's obviously extremely difficult to play, there's no question about it.
An Australian is through to the men's doubles final. Matt Ebden and partner Rowan Bapana celebrated like the Special Ks after winning their semi-final in 3 sets. At 43, Bapana recently became the oldest player to reach #1 in doubles.
I think this grey hair didn't come pretty easy, you know.
But an Australian won't feature in the women's doubles final after Storm Hunter and Katerina Siniakova lost in 3 sets. Tom Maddox, ABC News, Melbourne Park.
A late afternoon fight back from the West Indies has frustrated Australia after its bowlers delivered a dominant opening session on day 1 of the second test in Brisbane. Mitchell Starc did the damage with the ball, taking his 350th test wicket before the tourists' lower order dug in. A short time ago, the West Indies were 5 for 134.
The West Indies won the toss and elected to bat, naming a 4th debutant for the series in the process. Off-spinner Kevin Sinclair, the only change from the first test for either side. There was early excitement when Josh Hazlewood thought he had Craig Braithwaite LBW, but an instantaneous review showed a huge inside edge.
Not a great start for the
umpiring side of things.
But after facing 17 consecutive dot balls, Braithwaite wafted one too many outside off stump.
Hazelwood is relentless.
The paceman quick to shoo away COVID-positive all-rounder Cameron Green, who was left to celebrate by himself. Nathan Lyon was introduced in the 10th over as the run rate stalled. Tasmania Shanda Paul producing some fancy footwork to avoid an embarrassing dismissal to the off-spinner. Kirk McKenzie decided to push the scoring.
There's some aggression from McKenzie.
But Pat Cummins ended his stay at the crease gone for 21 after lashing at a wide, bouncing delivery. Chandabal had been offering some resistance, but he couldn't resist a wider one from Mitchell Stark.
Edged and taken, beautifully done.
The left armour then claiming 2 more quick wickets as he passed the 350 test dismissal mark and closed in on Dennis Lilly on the all-time list. The West Indies needed an injection of life and Joshua Da Silva tried to provide it as the tourists found some fight in the late afternoon sun. Tom Wildey, ABC News.
Northern white rhinos were once found across Africa. Now they're on the cusp of extinction, almost wiped out by illegal poaching. But there is hope for the future after scientists performed the first successful embryo transfer in its closely related southern species.
Najin and Fatu. This mother and daughter are the only 2 northern white rhinos left in the world. They live closely guarded on a reserve in Kenya. Now a fertility breakthrough may offer a way to save the species. Using a procedure on a closely related subspecies, scientists have successfully transferred the embryo of a southern white rhino into a surrogate mother.
It is really a great milestone to achieve the first successful embryo transfer in the rhino. It's very challenging in terms of placing an embryo inside of the reproductive tract, which is almost 2 meters inside of the animal.
The next step is to replicate this and produce northern white rhino calves. The last male died in 2018, but 30 precious embryos are being stored in a lab in Germany. Najin and Fatu aren't capable of carrying a calf to term, so the embryos will be implanted into a southern white rhino surrogate.
But with this new technology, we see that we have a really fair chance to achieve this, the first pregnancy of this magnificent species in this year.
It's a race against time to make the impossible possible before these northern rhinos are gone forever. Joni Jones, ABC News.
To the weather, and tonight's photo of sunset at Don Heads at Devonport is from one of our regulars, Robin Wishaw. We like to hear and see from our regulars, and I know Finn Gall likes getting a weather mention, and the Valley topped the state today with 28 degrees. Hobart had 27, Burnie 25, Launceston had 24. The satellite image shows Cyclone Kirrily bearing down on Townsville. This system to our southwest will deliver strong winds to Tasmania tomorrow. The first front will cross tonight with winds increasing during the day and reaching up to 40 knots about the southeast. Across the country tomorrow, hot and windy in Sydney, 38 degrees, 32 for Brisbane and Perth, the chance of a shower in Melbourne. Back home, showers about the west, far south and the Bass Strait Islands with some isolated showers elsewhere. Thunderstorms are possible about the southwest. Between 5 and 20 millimetres is forecast for Strahan and Zeehan, possibly a little more in Queenstown. 18 degrees in Strahan, only a millimetre or two about the northwest, 19 in Burnie, 20 in Smithton, fine and windy in Devonport, 22 degrees, Launceston fine and 23. Heading east, 23 degrees also in Swansea, 25 for St Helens. And Hobart has a medium chance of a shower, most likely in the morning, with a top temperature of 21 after an overnight low of 15. Sunrise tomorrow will be at 2 minutes past 6. On coastal waters, there'll be west to northwesterly winds of 20 to 30 knots, reaching up to 40 knots in the southeast and up to 35 knots near Flinders Island. There are gale warnings from Tasman Island to Low Rocky Point and near Flinders Island, and strong wind warnings for all other coastal waters, as well as the Central Plateau and southwest lakes. Saturday, there'll be showers about the west, south and Bass Strait Islands, extending statewide in the middle of the day. Sunday, fine, apart from some light showers about the west. And looking ahead, it appears we're in for a perfect week of summer weather, when most people will be back at work. And that's it for this evening's program. Up next is the Australian of the Year Awards. Liz Gwynn will be with you tomorrow. I'll see you Monday.